If you are in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, and there is a box of breaded fish, a frozen pizza, or a microwave breakfast sandwich sitting in your freezer right now, what you're about to hear could change the way you shop for groceries for the rest of your life, because the same freezer that is quietly working against your heart can just as easily become one of the most powerful tools you have for protecting it. And almost nobody realizes which foods belong on which list. Here is the twist most people miss. Frozen food is not the enemy. The problem is that 4 of the most common items sitting in a typical freezer are doing far more damage than anyone expects, while 4 others, sitting right next to them on the very same shelf, are some of the most protective foods you could possibly eat. And today, we are going through both lists, the ones to throw out and the ones to stock up on. So stick with us, because the last food on this list is the one that quietly supports your independence in a way almost nobody talks about. Let's start with what needs to go. First, breaded frozen fish fillets. Fish on its own is genuinely good for your heart, rich in lean protein and omega-3 fats. But once it gets breaded, deep fried, and frozen, most of that benefit gets buried under refined flour, added oils, and a surprising amount of sodium, often well over 500 milligrams in a single serving. The American Heart Association recommends most adults, especially older adults managing blood pressure, aim for under 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day, so one fillet can already eat up a third of your daily limit before lunch. As kidneys naturally become a little less efficient with age, that sodium tends to linger in the bloodstream longer, which is part of why some people notice puffy ankles by evening or blood pressure that creeps up for no obvious reason. There's also the frying oil to consider. Many breaded frozen fillets are cooked in oils that can contain small amounts of trans fat, and decades of research, including work highlighted by the American Heart Association, have tied trans fat intake to higher LDL cholesterol and a greater risk of heart disease, even in relatively small amounts eaten regularly. None of this happens from one dinner. It's the kind of thing that adds up quietly, meal after meal, month after month, which is exactly why it's easy to overlook. The fix is simple: buy plain frozen fish with no breading, then bake or pan sear it yourself with olive oil, garlic, and lemon, and you keep the protein and the omega-3s without the extra baggage. Salmon, cod, and haddock all work well this way, and a bag of plain frozen fillets usually costs about the same as the breaded version, so you're not even paying more for the better choice. Second on the list, frozen pizza. It is cheap, it is fast, and for a lot of people, it has become the default answer on a long, tired weeknight. But a single personal size frozen pizza can carry well over 1,000 milligrams of sodium, and the crust is usually made from bleached, refined flour that has been stripped of nearly all its fiber, which means it digests fast and can send blood sugar climbing quickly. Add in the processed cheese blends many brands use, which often include sodium phosphate, and researchers have raised concerns that excess phosphate intake over time may be linked to unwanted calcium buildup in the arteries, which is exactly the opposite of where you want that calcium going. None of this means pizza night has to disappear. Try a whole grain crust, real mozzarella, fresh tomatoes, spinach, and a drizzle of olive oil, and you get the comfort food without stacking every risk factor onto one plate. It takes maybe 15 minutes longer than pulling a box out of the freezer, and honestly, it usually tastes better too, which makes it a lot easier to stick with than a diet that just tells you to give pizza up entirely. Third, frozen fruit smoothie packs. These get marketed as an easy health boost, and on paper that sounds great, but a lot of these blends lean heavily on high-sugar fruits like mango, banana, and pineapple in concentrated amounts, and freezing plus months of storage does gradually reduce vitamin C and some of the protective plant compounds in fruit. So you can end up drinking most of the natural sugar with less of the antioxidant protection that would normally help balance it out. And if the pack gets blended with fruit juice or sweetened milk, which happens more often than people expect, the sugar content climbs even higher, which can mean an energy spike followed by an afternoon slump that most people never trace back to their breakfast smoothie. Some of these packs also throw in so-called superfood powders like acai or goji berry that have been dried and processed to the point where very little of the original antioxidant content survives, so you end up paying a premium for packaging and marketing more than actual nutrition. A better move is building your own from scratch with lower sugar fruit like frozen blueberries or blackberries, a handful of spinach, a scoop of unsweetened protein powder, and a tablespoon of ground flaxseed, which gives you steadier energy and real nutrition instead of a sugar spike wearing a health food costume. It takes about 2 minutes longer than tearing open a pouch, and your blood sugar will thank you by early afternoon. Now, before we get to the single worst item on this list, here's a quick favor. If this kind of straight talk about food and your health is useful to you, hit subscribe, because apparently the algorithm loves a good freezer cleanout as much as your arteries do. Number 1, and by far the biggest offender, frozen microwavable breakfast sandwiches. These stack nearly every risk factor from this whole list into one item. A single sandwich can carry close to 1,000 milligrams of sodium, a big chunk of a full day's limit before 9 in the morning, and they typically include processed meat like bacon or sausage, which contain nitrates that the World Health Organization has linked to increased cardiovascular and cancer risk with regular heavy consumption. Many versions also use a liquid egg blend made with powdered egg, emulsifiers, and anti-caking agents that gets cooked, frozen, and reheated at high heat. And that kind of repeated processing can generate compounds called advanced glycation end products, which some research associates with increased inflammation in blood vessels over time. Even the muffin or biscuit is usually made from refined white flour with almost no fiber, which means a quick blood sugar spike followed by that sluggish, foggy feeling by mid-morning that a lot of people just chalk up to getting older. If that sounds familiar, it might not be your age doing that to you. It might be breakfast. A far better grab-and-go option is a hard-boiled egg you made the night before, a piece of whole grain toast, and a piece of fruit, or even just plain oatmeal with cinnamon, both of which take barely any more effort once you build the habit. Now let's flip the script because your freezer can absolutely work in your favor, starting with the food that gives the smallest benefit on this list, but still deserves a spot in your cart. Number 4. Frozen edamame. These little green soybeans are one of the most complete plant-based protein sources you can buy, and they contain natural compounds called isoflavones, which some research suggests may support healthier blood vessel function as we age, along with an amino acid called arginine that your body uses to help produce nitric oxide, the compound that helps blood vessels relax and blood flow more easily. Edamame also has vitamin K2, which research suggests may help direct calcium toward your bones instead of your arteries, plus a solid dose of fiber with virtually no cholesterol. On top of that, edamame contains a meaningful amount of dietary fiber, which supports a healthier gut, and a disrupted gut has been associated with higher inflammation levels throughout the body, including inside the blood vessels themselves. Steam it for about 5 minutes, add a little olive oil and sea salt, and toss it into salads, soups, or eat it as a simple snack. It's the kind of thing you can keep a bag of in the freezer for months and just grab a handful whenever you need it. Number 3, frozen spinach. It is not flashy, but it might be one of the single most valuable vegetables you can keep in your freezer, because spinach frozen at peak ripeness holds onto naturally occurring dietary nitrates, which your body converts into that same blood vessel relaxing nitric oxide we just talked about. And several studies have linked diets rich in nitrate containing vegetables like spinach to healthier blood pressure. It also delivers magnesium, potassium, and folate, 3 nutrients a lot of older adults run low on without realizing it. Magnesium for a steady heart rhythm, potassium to help balance out excess sodium, and folate to help regulate homocysteine, an amino acid linked to arterial plaque buildup when levels run high. If you've ever dealt with cold hands and feet, occasional dizziness, or blood pressure that stays stubbornly a little high even though you're eating reasonably well, that's often the stage where small, consistent changes like this make the biggest long-term difference, especially if your doctor has described your numbers as only borderline elevated rather than seriously high. Best part, frozen spinach comes pre-washed and chopped, so you can toss a handful into a sauté with garlic and olive oil, or blend it straight into a smoothie with basically zero prep. No chopping, no waste, no excuse not to use it. Number 2, frozen mixed berries, especially blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries. These are loaded with plant pigments called anthocyanins, and research has connected regular berry intake to improved cholesterol markers and healthier blood vessel function in adults over 60. Berries also support what's called endothelial function, basically how well your blood vessels expand and contract on demand, and poor endothelial function is considered one of the earliest quiet warning signs of cardiovascular trouble. Because berries are lower in sugar and high in soluble fiber compared to fruits, like mango or pineapple, they tend to be gentler on blood sugar while feeding the beneficial bacteria in your gut that researchers connect to lower inflammation throughout the body, and frozen berries are just as nutritious as fresh, sometimes more so, because they are typically frozen within hours of being picked. Grab a handful straight from the freezer, let it thaw a few minutes, and add it to yogurt, oatmeal, or a shake. If cholesterol numbers have been stubborn or you've noticed a bit more brain fog lately, this is one of those quiet, low-effort habits that tends to help more than people expect, without needing another pill or powder. And now, the food that may offer the biggest benefit of all, one that does not just support your heart, it helps protect your independence as you get older. Number 1, plain frozen chicken wings. Air-fried or oven-baked, not deep-fried, not doused in sauce from a restaurant menu. After age 60, most people begin gradually losing muscle mass through a natural process called sarcopenia, and that slow muscle loss is a big part of why stairs feel harder, why carrying groceries feels heavier, and why balance can become less steady over time. Prepared without breading or deep frying, chicken wings deliver complete, high-quality protein your body can put straight to work preserving muscle, and research has linked higher protein intake in older adults, especially from poultry, to better long-term cardiovascular outcomes. Wings also contain more skin and connective tissue than a plain chicken breast, which means more natural collagen, a structural protein that supports flexible arteries and healthy joints, plus a solid dose of vitamin B6, selenium, and zinc for immune function and nerve health. Most people only think of wings as a football game food, drowned in sauce and pulled straight from a deep fryer. And that reputation has a lot more to do with how restaurants prepare them than with the food itself. Separate the cooking method from the ingredient, and plain frozen wings turn into one of the more practical, affordable protein sources you can keep stocked in a freezer. Season them with garlic, rosemary, or turmeric, cook them in the oven or air fryer with no added oil, and you get a genuinely practical tool for staying strong and staying mobile, the kind of small habit that quietly supports being able to carry your own groceries and keep up with your grandkids for years longer than you might expect. So here is where that leaves you. Clear out the breaded fish fillets, the frozen pizza, the sugary smoothie packs, and the microwave breakfast sandwiches, and start stocking edamame, frozen spinach, mixed berries, and plain chicken wings instead. None of this requires flipping your whole diet upside down overnight. It is the small, repeated choices, made week after week, that actually add up to something real over months and years. A woman we'll call Linda, in her early 70s, spent years grabbing a frozen breakfast sandwich on her way out the door because it was fast and she was busy taking care of her grandkids 2 mornings a week. After hearing about the sodium and processed meat in that daily habit, she swapped it for oatmeal with frozen berries and a handful of walnuts. Nothing dramatic, no supplements, no special program, and at her next checkup, both her blood pressure and her energy levels had noticeably improved, not because of one miracle food, but because one small daily habit finally stopped working against her. That is really the whole point here. Your freezer was never the enemy, it just needed a little editing. So take a look at what's actually in yours right now, and if even one of those 4 foods to avoid is sitting in there, that's worth changing this week, not someday. And hey, if this saved you a trip down a confusing grocery aisle, do us a favor and leave a comment telling us which swap you're making first. It genuinely helps more people find this. This information is for general education and is not a substitute for medical advice. So if you have specific heart or kidney concerns, check with your doctor before making major changes to your diet. Thanks for spending this time with us. Take care of that heart of yours, and we will see you in the next one.